Greetings to all on International Day of Rural Women. So I was just quickly checking the numbers this morning. And the two biggest countries in the world now, of course, are India and China. But China is much more urbanized than India. So if we look at rural women, there are about roughly 275 million rural women in China. And there are 400 plus, 405 is the kind of number used in India, rural women in India. So we have the highest number of rural women in the world. And what this means is that if we are going to talk about women's empowerment or any kind of transformation of rural women, unless it happens in India, it's not going to happen in the world because we have the largest number. This is also true of food security and other things. But I think that gives it a kind of, perspective. Like this is a very, very, important issue. We're talking about 400 plus million women in the country and their situation. The second point I want to make is that rural women are very heterogeneous. So it's not when we talk about rural women that there's one group and everybody is the same and has similar features. And there are huge, anybody who has been in rural India will know that there are huge class and caste divisions. So when we talk about working with the rural community, I think it's actually the task of the organization such as MSSRF to build that community, because often there are so many divisions. And I think this is something that particularly people outside the country don't realize. It's not a one community of rural women. Maybe you have to, it's a task actually to bring people together, on the basis of economic opportunities or social issues or other matters. So that's the second point I want to make. The third point is that when we look at the data and look at rural women, now I'm talking more about those who are not related in some way to agriculture. So there are, of course, teachers in rural India, there are Anganwadi workers, but the majority of women are engaged in some way with agriculture or other activities such as dairying, fisheries, sericulture, what we call allied activities, but which is much more than allied. It's a whole rate of activities related in some way to horticulture, crop production, and different forms of agriculture. Now, among these women engaged in agriculture, there are three types of work. Because today I think I'm talking about women's work really and how we understand and address their problems. There are three types of women's work. One is women who work on their own farm. So it could be taking care of livestock within their home, or it could be farming, agriculture, cotton production or flowers or whatever it is on their own farm. It's women who work. A second category is women who work on others' farms. So this is typically what we refer to as wage labor, agricultural workers. They work on others' farms. And then, of course, there are women who hire in other women to work on their farms or their sericulture unit or their other production unit. So we can think of three types of, when we take the range of activity or economic activity. I must say here, when I say work, I'm talking about economic activity, though I will talk later about care work, which is very, very important. But for the time being, I'm talking about economic activity. So women's labor could be on their own farm, and it could be on others' farms or others' fish farms or others' poultry units, so that any other activity. And official statistics don't tell us anything about these differences in work. And what we find, and I'm using throughout this lecture examples from village studies done in 27 villages across India, by the Foundation for Agrarian Studies, a small organization based in Bangalore. And the material which we have put together in this book called Women and Work in Rural India. But more than this also, we actually have disaggregated data on these different types of labor that women engage in. And I think the striking finding is that it's very difficult to find women who only work on their own farm, and largely we find small farmers, which is, as Soumya said, pro-poor, pro-women is the MSSRF motto. Small farmers, women on small farms or small other units work on their own farm and also work for others. It's a very fluid relationship. And during the year, they may work some days on their own farm. And when they don't have work on their own farm, they work on others' farms. And we also refer to this as proletarianization of the peasantry. But the bottom line is that when we're talking about women workers, we have to understand that we have women who only work on others' farms or others' fields because they're landless. But there are also those who work on their own farms exclusively. There are a very small proportion of those in India. And the majority are those who work wherever work is available, employment is available on their own farms or elsewhere. So this makes it very complex to understand what we mean by a rural woman worker. She actually plays multiple roles. Now, I am not going to give a lot of statistics and so on today. I can give references later for those who are interested, but I want to just tell you a few features of women workers that we have found based on these large number of village studies. They're still not as large as the number of villages in India. We have 5 lakh plus villages, but these are very in-depth studies. So we can learn something about characteristics of women workers, and I think which are applicable elsewhere. The first thing is that for men in rural India now, when we look at men workers, male workers, they engage in agricultural and non-agricultural tasks. And these could be in the village, they could be at commuting distance, or they could even have to migrate for a few months a year to the city or elsewhere for this non-agricultural job. But when we look at women workers, they are largely restricted to agriculture. Non-agricultural employment opportunities are very limited for women workers. And I'll explain why this becomes important later, because of course wages or earnings are much higher in non-agricultural tasks. So I think this is something that we need to understand, that if we look at women workers, they're largely in agriculture. And more, our national statistics are not capturing this. But as men migrate, either for short duration or long duration, or even if they don't migrate, they prefer to go and work on the construction site because they're getting paid more. It is women who are the backbone of agriculture. So again, this is something I'll come back to again, that when we are talking about policies, when we're talking about what interventions to make, what technologies, how to reach farmers with information, who are we reaching? It's women farmers or women workers. So I think this is something that the official statistics doesn't capture it fully, but this is actually a fact. The second thing is that, there is, and I'll come back to this later, there is a myth in India, or there is a so-called paradox, maybe I'll talk about it now, that women's work participation is very low. In other words, if you look at the official statistics today, about 42% of rural women are engaged in the workforce, whereas it's 80% in most countries of the world. And we are only Pakistan, Afghanistan, Iran. There are a few countries which we can compare ourselves to. Now, I think this is actually, and there are a lot of papers, hundreds of economists are writing on this paradox of why is women's work participation low. I think it's a bit of a waste of time, because actually it's the bad statistics. We are not capturing adequately the work that women in rural India are engaged in. And I'll give you an example of that from our studies in a little while. But before going to that, or maybe I'll give that data. So when we look at women's work, how many women in rural India are working? Again, I'm talking about economic activity, taking care of children, elderly, all that's very important, care work, but I'm not talking about it right now. In official statistics, the labor force survey, a woman is asked usually, what was the main activity you were engaged in over the last 1 week or 1 year or 6 months? And then you're classified as a worker or a main worker or a marginal worker or a non-worker or somebody engaged in education, institution, and student, and so on. Now, there's a lot of writing that this is a very flawed way of asking a question. The alternative that has been recommended, and finally India also has done a time use survey, is a time use survey. The first national time use survey was done only in 2019. So although we have such a good statistical data system, or had, the first time use survey was done in India in 2019, whereas in many countries of the world, including in developing countries, it's been happening for the last 20 years. Now, in a time use survey, the question you ask is not what were you doing? Were you a worker? Were you an agricultural worker? Were you a construction worker or some such thing? But you were asked in the last 24 hours, what did you actually do? From 6 a.m. when you got up, what did you do? Then at 6:30, what did you do? So you are just describing your activities over the last 24 hours. You're not calling it anything. You're just saying, I did this, I fed the cow, I made tea for the children, I took them to school. You're just describing your activities. And then the researcher decides whether you're engaged in economic activity or care work or not in any kind of work, what is called non-SNA or non-economic activity. Now, in 2017-18, we did this kind of time use survey, because at that time we didn't have a national survey, in 2 villages of Karnataka, because it's close to us in Bangalore. But we did something unique. We did 7 days continuously. So we don't have 24-hour data. We have 24 into 7. I think this is actually unique in the world. All the other time use surveys internationally look at 24 hours. And we repeated this in 3 seasons: lean season, sowing season, and harvest season, because we know agricultural cycles and the availability of work will differ depending on the season. Now, as you said, cyclone is happening. Nobody is going to be in the field. So you have to look at the seasonal activity. And there are 2 findings. I mean, there are many findings. I'm going to just give you 2 findings from this survey, which we did 24/7, small number of women, but over 3 seasons. First, if we take the definition proposed by the International Labour Office, the ILO, which is that anybody who is engaged in economic activity for at least 1 hour during the reference week, that is the previous week to the survey, is going to be called a worker. If we take that definition, everybody is a worker. So we said that's too easy. Let's take a stricter definition as is used in the Indian labor force surveys, which is what we call the weekly status definition. That is the reference week. What was your economic status during the last week? And as I said, we have 3 weeks in the year for these women. If we take what was the major time spent during the last week? Okay, so not did you work only 1 hour, but the major time spent, then 85 to 90%, 95% almost 100% of women were classified as workers during the harvest season. So when there was harvest activity in the village, and we looked at that week's work for them, the major part of time, not just 1 hour, major part of the reference week of 24/7, that is 1400 hours, was spent in economic activity. When we came to the lean season, the month of May, for example, when there's not much economic activity in the village, they're all waiting for the monsoon. At least here in Karnataka, it's a dry season. Only about 50 or 60% of women were classified as workers. So what is the numbers don't matter. What is the message I'm trying to get across? Message is to, when there is work opportunity available in the village, which is the harvest season, all the women are workers. When there's no economic opportunity available in the village, then 30, 40, 50% are workers. And I think this just explains away what the official statistics are failing to capture. What the official statistics are saying today are only 40% of women are workers. What I'm saying is no, there's no economic opportunity available for women. That's why only 40% are in the workforce. And why is there no employment opportunity available for women? And I think that is the crucial question, the rural unemployment, the lack of suitable employment opportunity. And that is the way I think we have to work to think of how to promote livelihoods, how to promote economic activity. So when there are two reasons, of course, also for this. One is that it's not so easy for women to go commuting for work because they have household constraints. They have to take care of children, elderly, they have to cook and clean. So that puts a restriction on, they can't search for economic opportunity in such a wide area, a wide radius as the men would be searching. Secondly, and related to that, there are safety issues in India. So again, women may not want to commute very long distance, particularly in some parts of India more than others. So this safety and mobility mean that women are searching for economic opportunity in their neighborhood. And when it's not available, you go to a village and they know there's no economic activity, and you ask a woman, are you searching for work? And she's going to laugh at you because she knows there's no work available. And what type of question are you asking? So she says, no, I'm not working. So I think this is a failure to capture the crisis of unemployment in rural India, and instead to call it a paradox of women not working or low women's work participation. So I think if I've conveyed this message, half my, my talk, main point of my talk is over. But that it's lack of economic opportunity for women for various reasons. They're constrained, for domestic reasons, constrained to the village or its neighborhood or its environments. And it is a lack of opportunity that is getting reflected in official statistics, which every other day people are writing papers and talking about, which is women are not in the workforce. So this is one point I want to make. Second, and I think it's very important, is when we capture many statistics, even our surveys which we do, largely we are capturing, how many days they're engaged in harvesting and transplanting and the main crop operations. Now, what we found through our time use survey is that if there is an animal in any house, milch animal, cow or buffalo, any kind of milch cattle, women are working at least 2 hours a day per animal in livestock rearing or animal rearing. So there have been a few other studies and by some of the ICR institutes, and I think we're getting a similar picture that if there is an animal, because most livestock farming in India is home-based. It's not in large dairy units and so on. It's home-based poultry, home-based goatery, home-based. Some animals like goats and sheep, which require grazing, is often done by men, but milch animals is done by women. So again, I think we have 200 plus million milch animals in India. I was trying to find that latest livestock production, but I don't have the number with me, but we can check it out. It thinks about. That means about 200 million women are spending at least 2 hours a day. Now, the thing about livestock care is it's like child care. You can't say it's Sunday, it's holiday, it's Dasera, I won't feed that cow. So that livestock rearing is every day. So it's 365 days in the year. And if you multiply it, you can see that this is equivalent 700 days. So it's equivalent about 100 days of employment in terms of our official statistics. And that's per cow. So if there's a household with 2 or 3 cows, then women are working more, 5-6 hours a day. So again, this is something that we found. I mean, once we found the result, it's not surprising. I think, again, anybody who has been to villages, and I know people in MSSRF working with so many livestock related, animal related, combining it with agriculture for livelihoods, that is the women who are doing it. Chicken is in the backyard, or pigs and poultry, sometimes goats too. So we then asked a question, and I must mention here that this is work of all my students and younger colleagues, and I'm not giving all their names here, but it's us that I'm talking about these results. When we went to the livestock policy of the government of India, there's no mention of women in that livestock policy. So women are feeding the animals, women are cleaning, bathing, women are milking, and in many parts of India, including Karnataka, and of course, very famously in Gujarat, women are marketing the milk. So except for veterinary care, which we found in Karnataka was done by men, men took the animals for veterinary care. All the activities are being done by women. So is our extension workforce, is our animal breeding, are we in all aspects of livestock policy, are we having the focus of women? I don't think so. Maybe it is there, but it's not there in that document, which is called Livestock Policy of the Government of India. So I think that what this says is that if we want to give information, and I think, again, people in MSSRF, I know, have worked on this, but if you want to give information on livestock care, you've got to reach that advisory to women in the household. And you have to find ways of doing that. And of course, in many parts of India, including in Karnataka, we have women in the cooperative sector who are selling to milk dairies, but they're not seen in the decision making, even in the milk dairies. Like the village we studied in Kolar, there's a big women's dairy in Chikmagalur. We went there, not Chikmagalur, in Kolar town, sorry. And we don't see women as much in the dairy board, in the decision making in the dairy industry. So they are there. They are the backbone of the livestock workforce in India. But you won't find this statistic anywhere because very largely, if you look at the official statistics, 11% of women are in the livestock industry. That comes to about 50 million in India. But I'm saying there are 200 million plus cattle. So there are definitely more than 50 million rural women who are engaged in some way in livestock rearing. So, Anamika, how many minutes am I supposed to speak for?
45 minutes.
Oh, okay. Okay, then I have time. Okay. So this is, I can go on, but I think the first feature of rural women in India is that all of them are engaged in economic activity. Let's be very clear about this. And when they are not engaged in economic activity, it's because of the lack of economic activities. It's because of the crisis of employment that you find women are not engaged in economic activity. So I think this is very important. And it's something that the entire, and I must say my economist community are all going on about paradox of low work participation, which I find, is now there are a few people writing about this, but I find that it's not a paradox really. There's no employment. They're not engaged in economic activity. So that's not a very big paradox. The second thing, as I said, is that in livestock rearing, anything we're talking about in fisheries, we know women are in the sea, but then the processing. So any activities which we look in agriculture, not just crop agriculture, we need to identify what is the role that women are playing. And increasingly with migration, women are playing more and more important role in all rural activities, particularly related to agriculture, not non-farm activities, because non-farm activities pay more, and therefore the men are the first to take the non-farm activities. Just as an aside, Many of you know about the National Rural Employment Guarantee Act and National Rural Employment Guarantee Scheme. When the scheme was started, there was a 30% quota for women. Why 30%? I don't know. Women are 50% of the population and probably more because of male migration in the rural population. But when we now look at the statistics, nationally, if you look at the statistics, 70% of NREG employment is women. So again, that shows that women are there in rural areas. Many men are migrating, women are staying there, and women are seeking work. So they're willing to go even for the most drudgerous kind of work that is often given. I know there are now innovative ways of doing National Rural Employment Guarantee, but a large part of it is still very construction related, digging, making, building roads, and so on, which is quite hard labor. And women are willing to go for that. So that 30% quota has no meaning because it's largely a women's program. I want to talk about the next issue, which is so wage rates for women are lower than wage rates for men. Now, this is something which is, of course, a global phenomenon, not just in India, but it's very noticeable in rural India. And this gap, wage gap between male and female wage rates, we do get daily wage rates, is partly a problem in comparing because there are some jobs, some tasks like transplanting that are usually done by women, and some tasks where both men and women, like harvesting, and then some tasks which like plowing, which is even tractor. Now plowing has become tractor plowing, but tractor drivers are largely women. Now, recently I was in China, and that was one of the things I observed. Women are in every occupation, whether it's tractor driving, metro driving, taxi driving, whatever it is. And that I'll come back to in the end, that women's access to a variety of occupations. But in India, talking again, coming back to rural India and to agricultural wages. Sorry, I'm just trying to open a file here to give you the gap in wage rates. But I think there are 2 points I want to make. One is that the ratio of women's to male wage, this is the average daily wage rate. As I said, it's not going to be very accurate, but this wage rate is quite significant. Male wages are about 1.2 to 1.5 times women's wages, or the other way around, women's wages is 50 to 60%, between 50 and sort of 70% of men's wages. This wage gap, interestingly, is higher in South India than in North India. Like Tamil Nadu, even Kerala, although absolute wage rate for women is highest in Kerala today, it's 500 plus rupees a day, whereas the average daily wage rate is about 300 rupees a day, all India wage rate. The gap is higher. And this may be because there are more women who are willing to engage in agricultural labor. So when we go to places like UP, you find that the gap between men and women's wages is not so high. So it may be like 60% in Tamil Nadu and 75% in UP. And you may say, is the gender gap better in UP? It's partly better because many women, for social reasons, are not allowed to engage in the agricultural labor market. So the supply of labor, as it were, is somewhat lower, or they are not even allowed to go to the neighboring village. Whereas in Tamil Nadu or Kerala, women can travel more easily, more independent, and therefore, in a way, there's higher willingness to work, and that has increased and that means that the employers can actually pay a relatively lower wage. But please don't get me wrong, the absolute wage in Tamil Nadu, in Karnataka, in Kerala is much higher than the absolute daily wage in, say, Gujarat or in Rajasthan or UP. Second is that the wage gap in non-agriculture is even higher. Again, this reflects the fact that as soon as there's a higher wage available, men take those jobs. So whatever new occupations are coming, so let it be tractor driving, or let it be, say, even construction itself, you have masonry work, which is more skilled, or plumbing work than just manual work, the wage gap increases. So again, this is something I think we need to be worried about, that as soon as occupations start getting a little skilled, so semi-skilled, the wage is higher and women's access to those jobs is less. This, of course, reflects male unemployment as well. So I'm not saying males shouldn't get job opportunities, but we must understand that women are being left behind, not just in rural India, but with lower wages. Now, what is the implication of these wage rates? So let's not just compare men and women. I want to give an example now, which I think takes us to our link with the food systems and food systems transformation. So before I come to that, I've been talking about women. When we talk about the food system, we mean from the production, to the consumer, the final, nutrition in the person of a child or a woman or a man who's actually consuming food. Now, I have tried to show you so far that in the production of food, of fish, of dairy, meat, milk, etc. So in the production system, women are playing a very important role, though it's not recognized, it's not counted properly, and it's not valued in the same way they're getting a lower wage. Now, let me jump to the other end, which is the consumption basket. And here, I want to just turn to something that some of you may have heard about, a new measure that the FAO and other organizations have put out in the last few years, since 2021, called the cost of a healthy diet. So the FAO and partner organizations have worked out what is the cost of an energy sufficient diet. This is what earlier we used to say, the minimum number of calories and proteins, say. The cost of a nutrient rich diet, that is your micronutrients. But then now there is a concept of a healthy diet, which is the right amount of calories, not just proteins, but all macro and micronutrients. Now, in 2021 or so, in the 2023 report, the cost of a healthy diet in India was worked out to be about $3 a day. For those of you who are listening, this is 2017 purchasing power parity. It's a little confusing, but it's $3 a day. Whereas most of us have thought about the global poverty line as originally being $1 a day and then going up to $2 a day. But the cost of a healthy diet, not surprisingly, is more. And this is based on the norms set by different countries. Now, for India, using the norms set by the National Institute of Nutrition, NIN, IFPRI, the researchers at IFPRI had worked out the cost of a healthy diet. And I'm just going to tell you the cost of a healthy diet for a woman, because NIN norms are different for men and women. So if you take an average woman in India, given the age-sex distribution of India, the cost of a healthy diet in 2011, I'm sorry I'm giving this old data because, as many of you know, the latest consumer expenditure survey just came out a month ago, or a month or two ago in June, July, and we haven't yet worked it out for that period. Using the 2011 data, the cost of a healthy diet was about 42 rupees a day in Gujarat and Kerala, and about 37, 38 in Bihar. It varies because food items prices vary across states. So just say about 40 rupees a day, 40, 42 rupees a day This is what a woman has to spend to eat throughout the day for all her meals. It is not cost of a thali. It's not cost of one meal. It's cost of the whole day's food. Now, what was the daily wage rate for a woman in rural India? This is for rural women. So I'm talking about rural unskilled wage rate in 2011 in Gujarat was 42 rupees a day. By the way, this paper has for all states of India, but this contrast was so striking, so I took Gujarat. In other words, a woman worker, an unskilled woman worker in rural Gujarat, would have to spend 100% her entire daily wage on just herself, not on her children or providing meals for anybody else in the family, and no cost of fuel, no cost of transport, no cost of anything else, medical expenditure or anything else. Entire wage rate would go just on feeding herself. No wonder, I think this explains in a way why our statistics are so bad when we look at nutrition, and they don't look so bad when we look at our low income poverty line, because income poverty line at $1 or $2 a day is not capturing the cost of a healthy diet. In just for comparison, in Kerala, the ratio was 70%. And in Bihar also, it was about 100%. For men, it was about 70%, 65 to 70% in Bihar and Gujarat. And only in Kerala was it a little lower. It was about, I think, 20%. In other words, given the wage rates in Kerala, a rural daily wage rate for an unskilled worker, a man would be spending 20% of his wage rate on himself, healthy diet, and would have 80% left for sending home as remittances or spending on other things for the rest of his family. Whereas in Gujarat and Bihar, again, a man would have to spend almost 67 to 70%. So this is, I think, a very important point. When I'm talking about the absolute wage rate being low, one is because we believe in gender equality, we want equal wages. But is also very low from the point of view of food and nutrition. On this daily wage, and if a woman has to feed her children, let alone, let's say the husband is working, or the another maid in the house is working, even if she's only feeding herself and her children, she can't buy a healthy diet. And I've already told you that the real problem in rural India is a crisis of unemployment. In other words, I didn't give that number, but on average, a woman is getting 50, 60 days of employment from our village studies in rural India. In other words, even this daily wage rate is something you don't get every day of the year to feed yourself. What you get for 50, 60 days of the year has to compensate and is the income you're going to use to feed yourself on other days. So I think this illustrates the real crisis in terms of getting the final nutritional outcomes we want, or the final consumption patterns that we want. And we have to link rural women's work, lack of work, the crisis of employment, the low wage rate, so not just the unequal wage rate, but even the lowness of the wage rate, to the final consumption, the cost or the choices that she is making and unable to feed herself or others in the family a nutritious food. Now, I want to give one more example here, that, as I told you, there are lots of economic activity that a woman is engaged in, which is not being paid a wage rate. Okay, so like livestock rearing. So you may say, you're just capturing one part and you're saying that, it's not just the wage rate that's going to help feed herself and her family, but there are other kinds of economic activity, and I agree. So let me give one example with livestock. So as I said, there are about 200 plus million milch animals in India. So at least 100 million women are engaged in livestock rearing. Official statistics say 50 million. So I think it must be double that, 100 million. Now, how much do these women earn from livestock rearing? Now, livestock rearing, you don't earn a daily wage because it's on your own family farm, that you own your own animal care that you're doing. But when you sell the milk, or when you sell the animal, or when you sell milk products, that's when you're earning the income. So there's a recent study from Haryana, which we know is has one of the highest cattle population in India, and demand for milk and ghee and butter and makhan and all is very high in Haryana. So there's an article published by a scholar from Bangalore in the Review of Agrarian Studies. She looks at, okay, so when look at the output that is produced and take the imputed value of that output, because in India, with a large number of rural households don't sell their output, whether it's the millet or the rice or the milk. They may keep it for their own home consumption, but that is output and that has to be valued. So economists always evaluate at the market price. So she looked at the price, and she looked at agricultural women, laboring women, poor women, who are generally scheduled caste women, and their sale of milk. And she looked at peasant women or jat women who are not selling milk but keeping it really for their home consumption. The average return per day. So as I said, daily work is there on livestock rearing. So if you look at the average daily return from livestock rearing, it's about 1/10 of the agricultural wage rate. Let me explain this point very clear. We all knew women who do work on family farms or their own work are sort of self-exploiting in some way, but I think we don't have these numbers. So what I'm saying is, suppose a woman decides to go and work, an agricultural laborer woman, say a landless labor woman, decides to go and work on the fields of somebody else for transplanting or harvesting or threshing or weeding. She may get, as I said, the average daily wage rate today for a woman is about 300 rupees. It's 290 to 320. So let's say 300 rupees a day. If instead she looks at after cattle, her own cattle, and sells that milk, the return that she gets is 30 rupees or 50 rupees a day. So the returns from livestock rearing are much lower. And this is not surprising then again why women are engaged in this activity. So women are engaged in an activity where the returns are very low. And again, you remember talking about women who are caring for livestock on a family basis, not in big dairy farms or dairy units and so on. Then the wage rate would be different. So I think that linked to the lack of employment is the question of the returns on economic activity, which I'm not saying returns on employment because sometimes it's self-employment. And it may be worth mentioning here for some of you who look at the official statistics that in the last 4 or 5 years, in official statistics, women's work participation rate in India has gone up, rural women, from about 27 to 42. But when you look at what is the activity that they're engaged in, it's self-employment. So if women through, I don't know, what is it called, various schemes of government of India are getting 5 chickens or backyard poultry or 1 cow or some economic activity, they are now reporting themselves as self-employed, which is good. They've got some economic activity, but we have to work out the daily returns on this economic activity. And my impression is, again, this is only based on one study, but I think that the returns to a woman's work, say 8 hours of work or 7 hours, whatever work she puts in, is going to be much lower than the daily wage rate for women, which is already much lower than the daily wage rate for men. So I think this is something that when we are expanding economic activity, we are imposing a work burden on women. So we go to rural areas, we say, oh, okay, women don't have enough economic activity. They have low incomes, they're unemployed. We need to increase the economic activity. But I think we have to make very sure that women are putting in more work, that they are compensated adequately, that the returns they get on this economic activity is high enough. And I think that's something that could easily be worked out from the various projects and other activities that MSSRF and others are involved in. Okay, I think I'm going to wind up because I don't want to go on to, there are other issues like women's access to land. And we know that that is also very unequal. Recent study again by two young colleagues shows that, just to give you an example, of total landowners, female landowners were 18% of total landowners in Uttar Pradesh, 36% in Kerala, and 67% in Meghalaya. So that is the kind of range we have. We know that in some northeastern states like Meghalaya and Manipur, women's access to land is much better. We've known this. But again, if you're looking at land-based economic activities, this is something we have to take into mind, that do women really have access to land, or how do we ensure that they get that access to land? The last word, and I have to say something on this because it's one of my interests, is also a lot of economic activity that is being encouraged among women in India by NABARD and by government and non-government organization is by providing microcredit. So I think here we have to be very, very careful because of exactly what I've said. When we give women microcredit for an economic activity, it increases a huge amount of burden of work, of hours of work. Is the economic return adequate? I think we have to, I don't want to go into the details of that. I have some views on that, but we have to work out if the economic returns are adequate. The last point I would like to end on is that I brought in a bit of disparate points, but anyway, I just wanted to share different issues because, as I said, the food systems is from one end to the other. The last point I want to talk about is related to MSSRF and the millets work in Kolli Hills. I thought I'll end with that. That one of the priorities of Government of India is and many other state governments is how to increase millet production and millet consumption, because millets are healthy and they're climate friendly. So, on the production side, it may be desirable. On the nutrition side, so we go through that whole food chain, it's desirable. And I think what the MSSRF in Kolli Hills over 25 years showed is that two of the important constraints in millet consumption was the drudgery involved in processing, for which small-scale machines were developed and have now expanded, and the drudgery involved in cooking. You have to soak millets for hours. It's not like cooking rice. You come home and put it on in 20 minutes. All of us do that. It's ready. Then it takes hours to cook. So we are saying that to eat the healthy food, the woman who is already spending so many hours of work in economic activity and care work has now to spend more hours in cooking. And that's why, again, the easy to cook foods, the process, the ready to eat upmas and all are so important, or the ready to cook mixes. So I think when we talk about expanding women's empowerment through women's work in the food system, we have to recognize that yes, women are capable of and engaging in every occupation and every kind of economic activity. But we have to ensure that that economic activity is not one which just increases hours of work without an adequate return. And only then can we ensure that the return that women get will also be adequate to feed themselves and their families nutritious food. So let me end with that, Anamika.